I'd like to introduce Daniel Ferron. He's with Ernst & Young. He has a really interesting business case. I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk about the application of artificial intelligence within human resources, but he takes a very strategic business approach. So we've had a lot of questions already. I can't wait to hear Daniel. Come on up.
Thank you. Great to see you. Well, good evening, everyone. I know that I'm the last thing stopping you from a proper glass of wine or a cocktail this evening, but I do get to do two things that I love. One is spend time with HR leaders, people professionals, and talk about the profound impact that you have in your organizations. Whether you're a Global 50 company or whether you're a privately held company, the impact of people is amazing. And as people leaders, there's never been a better time to be a people professional. And part of the reason that that's true is what amazing technology can do to really amplify the effectiveness of your teams every day, to deliver outcomes that matter every day. Outcomes that aren't just important to HR as a function, but really outcomes that matter in the business value chains that you support. And that's where I love to spend time, and so I'm going to spend about 30 minutes going through a topic that I think is really interesting. You're going to spend the next couple of days immersing yourself in what amazing contemporary technology can do. And what I'd love to start with is talk about why it matters. And not just why it matters from a function perspective, but why it matters really from a people leadership perspective within the function of HR. And so if we can go to the next page, if you don't mind. The first concept that I wanted to share with you is maybe a few things that all of you are probably feeling at the moment. The left side of this page talks about 6 major trends that are really shaping the future of work. The workforces that you gainfully attract and try and retain and do your level best to motivate and really inspire every day in the businesses that you're part of. And when you think about the impact of globalization, the fact that automation and the things that are happening in the technology space continue to press us from a speed of change perspective. The idea that you've got demographic differences, all different types of employees, more employee types than we've ever had to manage. It's not just full-time and part-time. You're talking about contingent workers. You're talking about delivering a work experience that makes sense for contractors, and really thinking about technology digital workers as a proper part of your workforce. And so as you think about these things, the graphic on the right side of the screen really starts to show a picture of what's happening around the people function, around the function of HR, and that is we're scaled and sized to do a certain amount of activities today, but what we feel is pressure, and that pressure is more opportunities to contribute, more ways that are people services that we're not doing today and we probably should be leading from an HR perspective. And what it looks like is you've got sort of fixed resources, fixed boundaries in terms of what you think the function of HR is defined as, and what we're hearing from leaders, and what we're hearing from the boardroom, and what we're hearing from our employees is they expect more. And they expect more from teams that are stretched from a resource perspective, they're stretched from a capability perspective, but that doesn't change the facts. The facts are pretty simple. The impact of the people function is stretching into uncomfortable spaces and doing it in a way that really has built business back. And so if you think about Raul's premise of HR is a function that's about business performance starts by working business back, not HR forward. And so understanding what those value chains are in your business areas, and they could be very different drivers of what creates value and destroys value in your organization, the business will tilt you to the places where you can have more impact and the places where, from a people services perspective, there's new, emerging, and unmet people needs that desperately need your attention. As we go to the next page, what I'd love to do is pick up the concept that Ben talked through a few minutes ago. And in that, don't mind going to the next page, please? And in that is, how is the workforce changing? And this graphic just shows you, again, a data set. And that data set is interesting, where it looks at what's the role of a digital worker in the function of HR. And when you think about where we are today, the graphic on the left, many HR teams have less than 10% of the tasks get accomplished by digital workers as a part of their team. If you think about a year from now, 30% of that work could be done by digital workers. If you fast forward to 2025, now we're talking about 50% of the activities that you do today being supported by digital workers. And what I think is really interesting about this picture is it's not meant to be scary. This is actually a really powerful thing, because it's about enabling your teams to stretch out into services you're not resourced to do today. Taking the capacity that you have and repositioning it, reinvesting it in the delivery of new and emerging people services that you know in your heart of hearts is where you should go next, and you don't have either the right skills or the right resources to focus on it. So think of it in simple math. If you're a 100-person team today, and someone said, you know what, you've got approval to hire 10 new members of an HR team, what kind of skills would you hire? What kinds of members would you bring to your team? If you're a 1,000-person HR team, now you've just got approval to hire 100 recs and go out and really amplify the effectiveness of your team. Where would you double down? What are those people services that matter most? And think about as the math goes, that's at 10%. At 30%, now you're talking about 30 people and 300 people. At 50%, that's 50 people and 500 people. And this is people power that you can put back into serving the business and serving your employees. The comment that opened our day, and how experience is such a critical part of the work that we deliver. Experience is co-owned. It's not something that originates within HR, but is absolutely a place where HR has impact. Same thing with engagement. Same thing with a number of things. Culture. Culture, as Raul talked about, is a critical board level issue. And trying to really operationalize ways of workers, behaviors, things that we do every day that send signals to our employees to say, you know what? This is the place I want to be. But usually we need help to get there. If we go to the next page, please. Here's where it gets fun. And this is why I think there's never been a better time to be a people professional than right now. This graph shows you how companies are reimagining themselves from an HR service delivery perspective, using amazing technologies to help them get there, because they can fill in this own chart for their business. And what's fun about it is they look at where are their places, when I look at serving HR, leading by example, and driving an amazing employee experience from the function of HR, that are common places for people to invest. And so whether it's workforce planning, analytics, the role of culture, driving inclusive behaviors, thinking about the different things we do from a rewards perspective in terms of driving and reinforcing behaviors that make sense. Let's not lose sight of true org design work, as we've got massively changing organizations, leadership teams that are combining and restructuring. How do we lean in to those business leaders as they restructure their function from a performance perspective? Same thing with organizational development, this idea of mobility of talent, and thinking about talent internally as being organized around skills, not around roles. And be able to forensically look at your organization and say, you know what, I've got amazing pockets of capability that weren't hired to do this kind of work, but guess what? They already call my company home. How do we figure out how to match skill with opportunities, roles, and projects? Because that's where HR is going, is kind of into this skill space. And so the fun part of this message is that as people leaders, working with your business leaders, you get to pick where you invest. Because the things that will matter in company A are going to be very different than the things that drive value in company B. But it's that way of sort of working business back and saying, you know what? These are people services we have to build now. Because if HR doesn't have the capability to do it, guess what? The business will do it for themselves. How many business units do all of their own org design work and then have HR process the actual input of position changes within the system? How many business areas are taking skill development on because the learning teams and learning functions with HR cover a teeny tiny slice of what the people development needs are? And so when you think of upskilling, that's a place where many organizations might spend time and want to invest more energy. So with this as a backdrop, what I'd love to do is maybe tell you a story about how a client that I've worked with over the last 7 months tackled this problem. They were part of a financial fintech organization. They had an HR team of about 660 professionals. They were in the middle of a big transaction. It was a really big deal from a history perspective and from a trajectory of the combined business perspective. And so they were going to onboard about 250 different HR professionals as a part of this transaction. So they were going to go from 660 people to 910 folks. And as a part of that journey, they really took a moment back and said, how do I use this opportunity of a strategic transaction to transform the way we're going to show up as a part of introducing the way we deliver people services globally, but at the same time, make sure that when we bring these teams together, we're coalescing around a combined team that does different things than just putting 2 payroll departments together, 2 HR operations teams together, 2 compensation teams together. That is too narrow. And they said, this is our opportunity to reshape our HR team, to think about how technology enables the delivery of services, and to actually recast the impact that this people organization was going to have on the business. And what they ended up doing is they ended up leaning into technology. And they said, the first thing we're going to focus on is I need a digital first port of call. We don't have it right now. We have a very traditional HR service center that takes lots of calls, it handles lots of inquiries, and does a lot of really basic things. And while, yes, there's value in that, that's not where we should be spending our people power. We should be putting it in other spaces. They also said, we've got amazing talent and a complete belief in our executive leadership team around culture, inclusive behaviors, and how we drive ways of working into the teams across this business. One person doing that job today. So how do we scale a culture group, an inclusion group, to actually have more impact in the business? And so where they landed was, not only did they deliver the synergy targets that were expected, they exceeded it by about 15%. But they did so in a way that allowed them to actually create a workforce planning and analytics team that could have real impact in the business. They went from 5 people to 14 people in that team. They took culture and inclusion and went from 1 person to now a 6-person team. They introduced the idea of agile consulting teams, project teams within HR that listen to the business, fix things from an operations perspective, and get it into production at speed and scale. 15 people in that group. And so not only did they meet their synergy targets, but more importantly, they recast what HR was possible to do from a people impact perspective in the business. So if we go to the next page, if you don't mind. So 4 levers that I'd love to talk to you about over the next 15 minutes. The first one is thinking about your core technology stack as being the spine of your service delivery model, and how do you get that right? The second, all forms of intelligent automation. Make sure you're thinking not just about robotic process automation, but you're looking at all the various elements that make up the ability to automate tasks in a meaningful way. The third, and this is where I think Ben nailed it in terms of his setup, how do you take people analytics from volume into amazing insights? And that's by taking a data-driven approach and a people-centric approach and putting those 2 things together that says, there's a million reports you can get out of a Workday, a SuccessFactors, an Oracle, whatever your primary HCM system might be. There's also amazing analytics tools that are available in the market. It's not about volume of insights, it's about really good insights. And really good insights require bringing that human element into really solid data. The last one is artificial intelligence. And as I listened to Raul and team talk just a few minutes ago, this idea of amplifying the effectiveness of your team, that's what it's about. It's not about replacing your team. It's not about challenging your team. It's about actually amplifying the impact of every person in your team. every process from an HR perspective, and how do you get better results through that set of activities. So if we go to the next one, what I'd love to do is just talk in sort of simple terms about sort of the core technology stack and how it's changing from an HR perspective. The blue section in the middle gets lots of attention. Whatever that integrated cloud layer is going to be for you, whatever your core HR system is going to be in that portfolio of complementary systems, gets a tremendous amount of press. But what I would say is, while yes, that's critically important, that is not the only game in town. The front end of this and the back end of this spine is just as important. This idea of a service layer, when you think about how you interact with and get questions answered and do things in your personal life, folks want that at work as well. If I'm in my house and I've got my phone in my pocket and I've got Alexa on the counter, guess what? I'm asking Alexa what the temperature is going to be today, because it's faster for me to do that than me to pull out my phone and pull up the weather app and serve myself. But if you think about a service layer, it's got a knowledge base, case management, virtual agents, how you deliver amazing artificial intelligence to maximize that service experience at the port of call. And so for the client I just talked about a few minutes ago, they had nothing in this space. And so one of the things they really invested in was getting their service layer right. The next set of boxes, think of it as being the automation layer. This is all the forms of intelligent automation. It's the connective tissue between your service layer and whatever your core solution in that integrated cloud layer is going to be. And what's fun is it does work in this layer. It's not an extra thing. It's automation that actually is cranking out activities and volumes and turning requests into completed transactions. How cool is that? You get credit for the case, and you solve and deliver an amazing experience. Now, by the way, it's entered flawlessly in whatever your core solution is going to be. So that automation layer is critical to connect your service layer and your cloud. Then when you flip to the back half of the graphic, it really starts to look at how are you using data and amplifying the impact of people analytics as a part of a broader analytics strategy within your business. And not just using the data you have, but looking externally. Third-party data, things that are publicly available. How are you bringing those insights into your data set so that when you look at people impacts and people insights, you've got a complete story that you can tell. And the last piece of this is one that maybe is often overlooked. And that's how you're enabling new ways of working within your teams, within the business. And it's all this business enablement layer. And it's everything from collaboration tools, the way we communicate and drive behaviors at scale across an organization. When you think about change insights around how people are doing with initiatives and projects and many things going on at the same time, it's that constant listening that brings new information into the equation. And then how you manage your projects, whether you use agile or project management, whatever it may be. So as we think about the business enablement layer, this spine is where the magic happens. But it's by itself, it's just a skeleton. It requires the people in your teams to bring this actual thing to life. If we go to the next page, please. So one of the things that's going to play in the background is a demonstration of onboarding from an RPA perspective. And it's a little less about what is the RPA doing in the background. And so definitely kind of see the pictures and kind of see how it works. And many of you, you've already been in sort of the RPA space for a while, so this is going to look pretty familiar. But here's what's really fun about automation from an RPA perspective. When you think about HR, 15 major HR process areas, today, 13 of the 15 HR process areas are actively using some form of onboarding or some form of automation from an RPA perspective today. The only things that aren't, HR strategy, employee and labor relations. And even employee and labor relations, which is held pretty close to the vest from an HR professional perspective, people are looking at the edges of that process too and saying, how can I amplify the way my ER consultants spread themselves and deliver experiences at scale across a global environment? And so they're tilting into that space. So every HR process area is on the table. When you look at many core process areas for HR administration, HR operations, all the things we do in the recruiting space, the talent acquisition space, payroll, whatever the sub-process is, every sub-process is a candidate for automation. And so when you look at your teams, One simple exercise that I've seen clients do is line up their people power. How much energy am I putting into this function? And then how much automation is possible within that function? And it really becomes pretty simple math that says if I've got a 38-person payroll team and every sub-process that makes up payroll is something where automation makes sense, I should ask the question, how much am I getting from my digital workers, and does it make sense for my organization? But even that sort of an exercise is valuable. And so what you're seeing is what an RPA, what it does is it acts like a person on your team. We call them digital workers on purpose because they're interacting with various systems. They're sending emails. They're going to your core system of record and creating the transaction. They're taking all those forms and all that information you get from various sources. Is it complete? Do I have all the information I need? Can I follow up with somebody? And so that's an example of how, in this case, RPA can be a game changer in terms of the way you look at getting work done every day. And what I think is personally fun about this is HR teams are like, you know what, I get no credit, almost no credit for doing everything you just saw on the screen perfectly, hundreds or thousands of times a month, a year, depending on the scale of your organization. If I get no credit for doing it perfectly and I'm putting a lot of my people power in it, the business is telling me something. They're saying that's table stakes. And for table stakes, how do you use automation to help you get it done? The next page, as we go into this, is going to take another angle on intelligent automation. It's going to look at what you can do from a chat perspective. When you think about basic artificial intelligence, we use this every day in our personal lives. Whether you shop on Amazon or whatever your format is, you go to any website, guess what? Text boxes start popping up saying, hey, can I help you with something? It looks like you're looking at this. Here's something else you might be interested in. Think about in the function of HR. Many of us have hundreds, thousands of questions a day we have to answer. And those questions usually get routed to an HR operations team that does basic servicing. And so in this case, think about the experience of, I don't have to call my HR team. I just talk to my phone, or I get on my iPad, or I pick my technology of choice to interact and say, here's my question. I just had a baby. What do I need to do? And what's great about chat is it says, hey, we can help you with that. You just had a baby. Let's collect some basic information. And have you thought about, do you need to register them as maybe being a beneficiary for your benefits programs? And so it's smart enough to think about, what is someone not asking that they should be asking? And presenting that information to say, you know what, I can help you with this too. You didn't call for that, but you know what, we can help you get a better experience in that space. And so what's interesting about this is think about chat as not being just limited to the things that are basic. It can be used in any function and any capability in the function of HR. And so when you think about chatbots and artificial intelligence as an amplifier, a way to drive additional value, this is just one or two examples of what that looks like. If we go to the next page, third area I wanted to spend time on is just this idea of amplifying and exposing the full value of people analytics. And first thing I'd like to draw your attention to on this page is, how cool would it be as an HR leader when you walk in and you sign on to your machine, whatever your machine of choice is, and instead of trolling through dashboards and dozens of reports and tons of information that allow you to consume probably more information than you've ever had as an HR leader, you get to say, you know what needs my attention today? In the same way you would ask a staff member, a member of your team, maybe that right-hand person that you lean into, that's what we do with clients every day. We make it so that chief people officers don't have to troll through tons of information, but instead can ask a basic question. What are the things that require my attention? And it draws you to the analytics dashboard that supports those statements. And says, okay, you need to pay attention to these three things. Here's the data at a glance. Now you're sort of poised and on the front foot as HR leaders, then go back and say, hey, this is something that I need to follow up on. Now I'm steered in the right direction. Another example is, how do you use external information and marry it with your operational data? And so one of the graphics we have in the bottom right-hand corner of this page is about a company that's actually using Glassdoor data and bringing it into their data set. And they're saying for every person that applies for a job, and oh, by the way, this company hires people every single day. This isn't a rare thing, it's an everyday thing. What are they saying? As a recruiting leader, as a talent acquisition leader, they can click on every piece of sentiment data and say, you know what? Every person that said they didn't like this about our company, what was behind that? And they can see all the comments. Or if they want to look at correlation of where they are in the job funnel from a recruitment perspective and how's their experience as a person that hasn't yet joined our organization, you bring those two data sets together. And what you're able to do is now have a much more forensic conversation as a recruiting team and as a talent acquisition team about how you're going through the process of creating experiences for hiring managers, for candidates, and for employees as they join your organization. The last page, if we go to the next screen, if you don't mind, is this idea of artificial intelligence. And what you'll see in this video is exactly where Ben started today. He said, you know what, when you think about the talent acquisition process, there are so many places where we trust automation to help us with those things that we're comfortable with. But what this video starts to show is, how do we go all the way up that ladder of maturity and begin to use intelligent automation and artificial intelligence specifically, not just at the point of scheduling or sourcing, but actually putting together candidate pools. Fun story with a client. They went through the space of saying, you know what, we'll make you a bet. We're going to take our 2 best recruiters, and we're going to line it up against your automation. Who's going to have the highest quality candidate pool? And they ran multiple rounds of that test. And what they found is, in round 1, the recruiters won. But because artificial intelligence learned for every way along the way, by round 3, the technology was beating the best recruiters in terms of putting together candidate pools for an organization. And it's not meant to be competitive that way, but I just thought it was sort of a fun story that says, if you think about recruiters and artificial intelligence working like hand in glove, lock arms, think about amazing talent pools you can bring to your organization. Think about looking internally for talent, people that aren't even looking for a job but sitting in your spot today. How are we thinking about them? This idea of just understanding what's next. Maybe this is a chance to have that conversation from an internal talent mobility perspective about, here's what a future for you could look like. I know you didn't think that that might be the path that you're on, but with these skills that you've got and the amazing performance you've shown so far, here's what's possible. And so I look at artificial intelligence as being the mother of all amplifiers. Take your best recruiter, your best payroll person, your best HR operations person, and they pump them up to 11 because you've got amazing technical insights paired with amazing people in your team. And when you do that in multiple process areas of HR, what you end up with is you end up with amazing outcomes for the businesses you serve, amazing experiences for the employees you serve, and really a place where, as you look at as HR professionals, that's why I got into this job. Because I didn't want to push paper. I wanted to elevate people impact. You get to have that every day as a part of your work. And there's a self-fulfillment part of that equation. So if we can go to the last slide, if you don't mind, just to leave you with a thought, and then I'm happy to take any questions you might have. When you really invest in a fully digitized people function, there's many outcomes, and I just picked a few. This idea of being liberating, taking the work, which is so heavy today, and I feel lighter because not only is my team working hard, but now I've got digital workers working just as hard as we do. And the power of us together, human and technology, is better than either one by itself. If you think about empowering, instead of asking permission to invest in people service areas that you know the business is asking for today, you're taking the capability they've already invested in you. You've taken your head count that's already been apportioned to your team, and you're saying, you know what? I'm going to put that head count in a place where it's adding greater value. And to do that, I need to look at upskilling. I need to look at moving into people service areas I don't do today, or things that are very immature in my organization today. We're going to double down. But it's empowering as a leadership team to go, you know what? We can do this ourselves if we lean into technology. We don't have to ask permission. We can just lead by example. And so it's exciting, it's affirming, it's humanizing, it's all the things you want as a people professional. But what I would say is it's an awesome time to do what you do. And so use these next couple of days and sort of pour as much of that knowledge into your teams as you go back and say, let me tell you about how we're going to change the impact that this team has in our business. All right, any questions? We've got no seconds left, but we'll try.
We have time.
Hi, Asif Khan, Geos Pharmaceuticals. We are around 550 people. So I guess two questions.
Yes, sir.
One is, what's the right size company for investing in both RPA and AI to see the value? Number two is looking at the HCM platforms and what they are doing to kind of embed some of these in their platforms, kind of investing in a third party or other system to do some of this work.
Yep. So let me take your first question first. So on a bot by bot basis, if you're a smaller organization, it becomes hard to make your business case. And what I would suggest is the way you think about automation is at scale. You're not looking at one bot, you're looking at a family of 26 bots. Because at that point, you're now changing your service delivery model. And you're taking chunks of work that used to be a little piece of this person's time, a little bit of this person's time, and now you've got enough scale where you can sort of make your case. And so what I would say is if you're looking at automation without going to your operating model, you're leaving money on the table. And if you're doing it sort of one bot at a time, you're going to get the first 6 or 7 sort of obvious answers where you have scale, and you're going to hit a ceiling. And you're going to be frustrated with that ceiling because on a bot-by-bot basis, it's hard to make your number. So that's sort of the automation side of it. I think it really is about operating model as opposed to scale by itself. Your second question around core technology, can you state that again, please?
So you have the core HCM technology, whether it be Workday, SAP, Oracle, and kind of having, embedding this technology in there. I don't know what the vendors are doing towards that, or basically bringing, technologies like, automation anywhere for the RPA portion of it.
Of course.
Where do you see that kind of either sticking to a platform and asking more from your HCM vendors versus trying to do this on your own and in conjunction with the HCM tools?
I think you've got both on the table, to be honest. You've got pre-built intelligent automation wired into many platforms. So if you think of ServiceNow, for example, they've got a virtual agent. And it's wired for ServiceNow infrastructure and ServiceNow technology. It's another capability that the ServiceNow team can bring to you as clients. Similarly, core HR teams are doing the same thing. They're looking at their products and they're saying, if the future of HR is automating some of what used to be in my core, how do I build that into my core stack? And sometimes it's automation that's paired with a Workday, a SuccessFactors, or whatever it may be. But I would say, look at all of it. Because honestly, you should pick up all of those rocks and say, what makes sense for our organization? I can see my roadmap of what a technology vendor may do. Does that match my time frame that I'm comfortable with? And if you're not comfortable with that, then use great partners to help you get there. You mentioned Automation Anywhere. One of the things that we had the pleasure of doing with them last year is we looked at their entire HR taxonomy, 15 major HR functions, about 1,400 tasks from an HR delivery of HR services perspective. Guess what percentage they decided as an automation company could be automated in the HR function? Anyone want to guess? 72%. 72%. So when you thought of those kind of 3 charts that said by 2025, 50%, they said, you know what, this is our core business. We're going bigger and we've got greater capability in that space. Let's go all the way there. But that didn't mean that they were making their team 30% its size. They were saying, you know what, I'm taking my people power and I'm putting it in other places, things that can't be automated because that is really powerful. And so that was just one example. Other questions or comments?
Hey, Danny. It's
Yes.
Soraya at Cox in the middle here.
Hey, Miss Sarai.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
You had the slide with the spine for level 1, and one of my questions is, we know there's business and cost constraints.
Yep.
There's the business asking us to move faster and meet all of those needs. In what order can you implement those in a way where it's not a 5-year roadmap and you're doing it in a way where we know the technology landscape is changing. By the time you sometimes implement something,
Yep.
it's already out of date or an RPA is in place, and now that process looks different because your core platform has changed. Can you just tell us a little bit about how to manage keeping up with that and how you tackle kind of that broader spine?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what I would suggest is block 1, your service layer, block 3, your core technology or your anchors. If you get those settled, and what I mean by settled is really fit for purpose for delivering services for your team, automation is the connective tissue between the two. And if that doesn't mean you stay out of the automation lane until you get kind of part 1 and part 3 done, just like you've done at Cox, you've picked obvious things and said, you know what, we're going to go after it from an automation perspective, but you run into use cases that start to pick you up into either your technical core or into your service layer, and you run into boundaries. And so I would say that would be general framing. The other thing that I see clients do all the time is they go back end. And they're saying, you know what, we've got such a mess in our core technology, we don't have any sort of service layer. That's a ways out for me in terms of getting that sort of structured. I'm going to work people analytics back. And I'm going to look at how do I get better data, bring better insights to my HR business partners, better insights to our business leaders, and they double down in the analytics space because that's one you can isolate from the rest of the mess, if you will. Yes, sir.
This will have to be the last question.
All right, cool. I know cocktails are on the horizon, so.
So my name is Gaja from Maxim Integrated. So as RPA technologies are evolving, is there a blurred line between, the right way of doing RPA versus putting Band-Aids? With GDPR, CCP, and other things coming up, when is the problem between an HR generalist updating something or an RPA messing it up?
Yep. It's a really good question. I laughed to myself because literally Thursday of last week, we were meeting with the VP of HR operations for a Fortune 5 company, and they asked the exact same question. And what they said was, if I go after my service layer and I go after automation, can I defer updating my core? Because it's a massive investment for our organization, and honestly, I'm scared of it. And what we said is, no, you can't defer updating your core because you're divorcing one critical part of your spine that's really, really broken. And unless you go after some of the things around process and policy standardization, you're just going to create complexity on top of complexity. And so there is a point where you have to look at the core and say, you know what, I have to bite that off because it matters. But think of it as being one move in a chess game where the ultimate payoff is probably other pieces moving on the board. And so the days of sort of that core HCM investment being sort of the king of all technology investments, it's not where the payoff is from an experience perspective, but it is certainly a place that is needed to do the things you want to do globally. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Wonderful job.